My realization came while I was sitting in the dentist chair and I was getting my second false tooth. And I had worked so hard with self help materials, with investing in books and videos and audios. You name it, I found it. And even though I invested thousands upon thousands of hours and dollars, it came to the moment that while I was sitting in the dentist chair, I heard, maybe there's something you just don't know yet.
Language on the inside of your head is something that affects you, but that we very infrequently discuss. There is a running dialogue on the inside of your mind and even the inside of your heart, but are you aware of it? So many people that I sit down with, they are business people, they are CEOs, they are change makers, and they talk and speak the language of change corporately. They talk about the language of change in their business, structurally, whatever they're doing. But are you willing to talk about the language of change on the inside of you? That's how we develop more holistic and healthy and fulfilling lives. And so today we're going to have a conversation about just that, how you can change the language on the inside of you to shift the trajectory of your life. And so today I'm excited to bring on this guest. She is a person who has kind of bridged multiple different worlds at this part of her journey. And one thing that has been consistent is her understanding and then leveraging of the power of language. So without further ado, I want to welcome Lenora Edwards. Welcome to Hope Rising.
Thank you so much for having me, Maurice. It's so great to be here with you. And I love the name of your podcast. I think it's so beautiful.
I appreciate that. So, for someone who doesn't know you, has never met you, how do you describe yourself? Who are you, and what do you do?
The short, clear way of saying it, I often say I'm a speaker, I'm a TEDx speaker, I'm an author, and I am also a coach. My specialty happens to be in the area of disordered eating, emotional eating, mostly because that's my area of expertise, as I had that experience when I was younger.
Mm.
And I am also a board certified speech language pathologist. So this conversation about language is going to be so good.
In so many ways. And it's interesting. I've learned, so I've been an addiction counselor for the last, I think, 7 or 8 years at this point. And we have a lot of conversations about what happens when a person gets stressed out and picks up an alcoholic beverage. A person gets stressed out and picks up, whatever it is that's their vice. We don't have enough conversations about when people get stressed out and pick up the piece of fried chicken, when people get stressed out and gorge the chocolate chip cookies. But ultimately, it's actually the same impulse. It's the same issues that are happening, and there's detrimental negative effects either way you go if you're picking up something because of that stress.
Completely. You said that so well.
So let's get into your journey, because I love to hear the backstory of how someone gets to this point of really not only becoming an expert, really helping other people with those problems. So you said that for you, it was somewhat of a struggle for you as well with the eating and things like that. Can you take us into your story, not just with the eating, but I guess paint a picture of who you were at that part of your life?
Oh, completely. So I had a very critical internal voice, and it was so vicious that I could barely tolerate being inside my own head. And what a lot of people don't necessarily understand, they understand they have thoughts and then they feel something about those thoughts. But how you actually change those feelings is a completely different world. And especially when you start to get into the positive mindset or the growth minded community, you'll hear a lot, well, think a positive thought. When you have so much negative thinking, when you have so many negative feelings inside you, it can be really hard to think a positive thought. So I would be very optimistic on the outside and very bright to other people, but my internal world was complete chaos. And I would have internal dialogue reminding me of that I was stupid and how pathetic I was and what a failure I was. And anytime those thoughts would come up, you would get a response. You have a physical response. You mentioned some people reach for alcohol, some people reach for drugs, other people reach for food. And it's the same system that is occurring. You're having a negative response, and you ultimately want to calm your nervous system so that you don't feel that way. And that's where we get into reaching for something else. We're not always taught, how do we actually calm ourselves? How do we soothe ourselves? How do we process these emotions? And what do we do with them when we're experiencing them? And I have come to experience and learn, I often call it an art. It's an art form, understanding how your thinking is affecting how you're feeling and how that shapes your internal world and your external world. Thankfully, I feel that we're coming to a point where we're having more of these conversations. And I think it's important to have a conversation about it, and how you have the conversation and where you have the conversation is important. Necessarily going online and having a whining fest on a live feed isn't what we're talking about, especially when we're experiencing problems, whether they're in problems with our marriage or problems in the family, problems at work. It's important to understand, and this is what I truly believe as a coach, when I work with my clients one on one, when I'm working with my clients and my students that are in the groups that I'm a part of, we're all coming to the table. Here's a problem. We're not pointing at that individual going, you're the problem. And that's truly pivotal, and understanding that when we can come together and see there's a problem, let's look at this, let's work on this. It's a no judgment zone. We're not pointing a finger, we're not shaming them, we're not guilting them, and we're not saying, you need to do it my way, which is not the best way to solve a problem. We're looking at it collectively going, what are our perspectives? What else might we be able to figure out? How else might we be able to help? And that is a huge difference as we're talking about change and as we're talking about shifting our mindset. When we can approach it without judgment, and when we can start to shift even just a few words in our sentences, it massively expands our mindset so that we can start looking at it differently.
Here's the interesting thing. When my team and I sit down and look at our analytics, we find that the chances are that you, yes, I'm actually talking about you right now, that you are not subscribed to this channel. And so I just wanted to jump on and give you an official invitation. Would you please join us in subscribing to the channel? I'm so excited about the upcoming interviews that we have, some tremendous people, and I want to make sure that you don't miss it. This is going to give you an opportunity to get weekly inspiration that could take your leadership, take your organization, take your personal life to the next level. So would you go ahead and subscribe? And then don't keep this just to yourself. Would you share this episode with a friend, a family member, a coworker, an employee, someone who needs this weekly information? Let's get you into this week's episode. I think that what is most interesting about what you were just talking about is we don't really have a culture that has learned how to talk about feelings, talk about problems, talk about issues, right? And so many people haven't really learned how to differentiate the difference between a true winning mindset and just what they see as a whining mindset, right? That in other words, a winning mindset says, "Hey, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. Life's not perfect, whatever it might be." A whining mindset, you're just talking about the negative but never getting past the negative, right? Talking about your feelings is necessary to win. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
I love this topic completely. And I love that you had said winners pay attention. We were talking about that earlier. And when it comes to a winning mindset and noticing your thought process, it's important to understand, especially when you're talking with people and when you have your own business and you have these dreams that are important to you, to go to people that you trust and who are also going to be in the growth mindset with you. There are times, and a lot of the time we'll hear your family and friends, especially on motivational videos, they're my favorite go-tos to watch while I'm running. And a lot of the time they'll say your friends and your family might hold you back because they're worried about you, that you're doing something completely different. You didn't go to school for this. What makes you think you can do that? And while their intention is to support and protect us going through that experience, it doesn't necessarily come across that way. And when you're experiencing problems, as you're evolving and you're going through periods of resistance and periods of growth, when you're having a downturn, and you want to talk about the frustrations that you're having, it's important to go to people that are going to support you in the, it's okay, it's a tough time. You're just having a tough time, Lenora. That's okay. Not, I told you you shouldn't have done that. Huge difference in how this will shape not only our perception of I can and I will, but also how it shapes our perception of maybe they were right. When we have a dream inspired within us, when we have something so much greater that we know we want to strive for, it's important that we are around other people that are saying, "Hey, I see that possibility. I'm with you all the way." Versus, "What makes you think you can do that?" And it's really important. That's how it'll keep shifting and shaping your winning mindset. You want to be in those groups of people who are saying, "Well, let's try this, let's try that." And really cultivating you and supporting you as you go through your processes. And this is what I love so much about coaching. And, I touched a little bit earlier about emotional eating and eating disorder. My realization came while I was sitting in the dentist chair and I was getting my second false tooth. And as some people may or may not know, when you have an eating disorder, your teeth take quite the rough beating, to say the least. And for me, I was getting my second false tooth because that's where I was at my point. And I had worked so hard with self help materials, with investing in books and videos and audios. You name it, I found it. And even though I invested thousands upon thousands of hours and dollars, it came to the moment that while I was sitting in the dentist chair, I heard, maybe there's something you just don't know yet. My own internal voice shifted thanks to the pounding headache that I had from the drill in my head. But understanding that maybe there's something you just don't know yet, that shifted my perception of maybe I'm not stupid. Maybe there is something I don't know. And maybe I can find the right people that will support that rather than beat me up for saying how horrible I am for experiencing this and going through this and what a terrible person I am. As I started to reach out to professionals, I got more connected with people who were growth minded, who were supportive, who were encouraging, that said, "Oh, Lenora, we have a problem. Okay, let's work on this together. I see you don't want this problem. Let's come to the table." And as I started to do that, this was what a supportive environment was, not a shame environment. This was a winning environment, not a whining environment. And that made all the difference. And as somebody who really focuses on her language, I have a background in speech pathology. I know a lot about language. It's important to understand that how we talk to ourselves isn't just the words. Our words can make us feel bad, our words can make us feel good. That being said, we're also communicating in our words are considered language. Our facial expression is considered language. Our body language is considered language. Our tone that we're using is considered language. So when you have a voice inside your head that's screaming at you, and then you start to shift it to the voice of Mickey Mouse, you shift the feeling. And this voice that was causing such terror in you now is actually making you laugh. They're saying the same exact thing, but your perception of what they look like, what they sound like, completely shifted the feeling that you're having. And that's how we start moving through these feelings that are trapped within us. We can start shifting them. And I worked with a number of professionals in a very specific technique. And this technique was so pivotal for me that I then became certified in this technique. And it indicates that our memories are malleable.
Mm.
So I know earlier we were talking about how we shift our perception of what happened at an event. This is the same thing. And when you can start to see that your memory is malleable, that you can shift your perception, then the game gets really fun.
Oh, that's so good. I ooh, there's so much I wanna say and I wanna ask just based on that answer. That was quite possibly one of my favorite answers anyone has given on Hope Rising for so many reasons. And I'll start with this one phrase that you said. I keep hearing it on repeat. You said, "Maybe there's something I don't know yet." And inside of that, there's so much possibility and hope that maybe there's something that you haven't learned, and maybe there's someone that you don't know, both externally and internally. There's so many things that we can learn when we embrace the word yet. And the other thing that answer really, I don't know, I guess just pressed on the inside of me. So most people don't know this. I think this is the first time I've talked about this publicly. But I've certainly gone through my share of therapy, and that includes like EMDR therapy, right? Which is a type of therapy of really taking a look at your memories and reshaping and restructuring those memories so that they don't feel as volatile on the inside of you. I've actually done a ton of that over the last year of my life. Many people believe that the thoughts that they're stuck with are the thoughts they're stuck with. The life they've lived, you can't change a memory, you can't shape a memory, you can't do anything with those thoughts. It is what it is. But you're saying that science can actually teach you how to restructure and reorder and reorganize those things. What
Completely.
can that do to a person's life when they start to take back those memories and those thoughts?
It shifts it so pivotally. I can the best way I can actually give you a good example is the year is 2024 right now. Had you known me March 18th of 2018, there was no way I was going to be on here having this kind of conversation. I was a completely different person. I was terrified of public speaking, and my inner dialogue, there would have been no way you would have seen it quite literally on my face. So I dabble in Chinese facial reading. When there's a mismatch on your face, it will show up. So as you're telling lies, as you're coming across and trying to convince somebody of something, there'll be a mismatch on the face. You would have literally seen a huge mismatch on my face because there is no way that I would have been able to have the posture or the ability or the integrity to stand here and share with you all of this information had I not gone through it and had it not been such a part of me. Truly, truly. I love that you mentioned EMDR. And with holographic memory resolution, this is the technique that I'm trained in. And I love when science can support situations where we're talking about things that people might have a little bit harder of a time grasping. In September of 2023, in the Journal of Psychiatric Medicine and Clinical Practice, researchers found evidence, absolute complete evidence of the effectiveness of this technique. And people experienced reduced levels of anxiety, increased emotional well being, and reduced symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder. So, specifically for me, there were multiple things that were resulting in me having an eating disorder, that were resulting in this behavior that I was having. One of which was also a past history of sexual abuse. When I was able to go back and shift the perception, but also allow my subconscious to understand that event wasn't going on anymore. What happens is our body's 100% memory. My body still thought it was having that experience. So then as other interactions go throughout the day and throughout your life, any type of experience that remotely indicates that would trigger the response, will activate the response. And as we're having a conversation, as people are going throughout their day, we're going in and out of memories. And we'll hear it in people's tones or their words or how they gestured something. We do this somewhere between 15 to 50 times an hour. And we know this from SPECT scanners. We are literally moving in and out of our memory all the time. So when you can understand just even a little bit, we're moving in and out of our memory. So we're getting pulled out of the present moment. We're getting thrown back into a memory and we're getting a feeling coming up, a response coming up of, oh, so for example, have you ever been in a fight with
Mhm.
somebody?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, me too. When we're in a fight with somebody, our memory, we're getting a physical response. We're having this chemical hormonal shift. We're getting all this activation of energy. And these other things are coming up. And sometimes it might be like, they're making me feel like this experience when I was 5. They're saying this like this person that I had in my life. And it takes us out of the ability to really focus on the reason that we're in the disagreement. And all this other stuff is coming with it. It's getting piled on top of it. So, how do we start to figure out, gee, no wonder I'm going 0 to 60 in a heartbeat. It's not because this one event, it's because of all these other times that have ever felt us ever made us feel that we were in an event like this. Our body is having this emotional response. So how do we start to process the emotions? We have therapy, we have EMDR, we have holographic memory resolution. We have all these incredible techniques that support humans in being able to process strong emotions so that we can function as we want to.
And the answer that you're giving, this is always my point for how you can be such a deeply spiritual person like I am, and also really understand the importance of science. I don't think that those are divided, right? That ultimately the science just studies what is. Science studies what already exists and searches for the logical pathways to adjust, change, shift the very things that are. And so it's not about the creation of something, but the understanding of something to create something. It's a whole other conversation, right? Um, as you were speaking, there was a couple things that really resonated with me. Now, the first one was that I needed to figure out what you are reading on me with this Chinese facial expression. Like what do you see with your super spidey skills that you've got going on there? Because you didn't tell me nothing about that before. I feel some type of way that you were reading me the whole time. So, what do you see when you analyze me with your superhuman skills that you've been studying?
You are too funny. And it's just a small amount that I dabble in. So, for example, when I will talk, we have a personal side of our face and we have a professional side of our face. We have very strong lines, or on my face, I'll have very strong lines here. These are my purpose lines. So they're indicating to me that I am within the purpose that I feel. As you mentioned, you're a spiritual person, so am I. I came here with an intention. These will indicate to me if I'm on my path or if I'm not on my path. When they're deeper, that's a good thing. Another example would be if I start talking about something that will anger me, different areas of my face will highlight. And for example, I'll get a mark right in here that will start to flash and then I'll get stronger and stronger. And it's an indicator that I'm suppressing anger or I'm suppressing something, whatever it may be. And it's helpful because we can understand our clients that much better. We can support them and say, okay, I'm noticing this. Let's talk a bit more about that. There might be something there. When we start talking about the conscious mind, so that's 5%, typically 5% is our conscious mind, and our subconscious is doing all it can to protect us and keep us safe. And it will also guard against things that we don't want to talk about with certain people. And we might be suppressing sadness and we'll come out with anger so that we don't have to touch into that sadness. And another thing you had mentioned about science, with our language, we're talking about how we're feeling. It's just that nobody really understood this until probably about the 60s or the 70s. And this is where we start to get into neurolinguistics. We're talking quite literally. Have you ever gotten that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach or that pain in your neck? You're talking about your body and where you have stored this memory, where your body has stored this information. And you're like, oh, it's really heavy, it's deep, it's dull pain. You're quite literally describing the location, how it feels to you, the texture, the temperature, all these characteristics. And that's your subconscious, that's your body going, here's where we stored the information. We might want to work on this. And that's a beautiful thing. So when I'm walking my clients through a specific technique, I'll start to ask them, when was the first time you experienced this? Or how do you know? This is a great one. How do you know it's time to have this behavior? And they'll say, well, what? I just know. I said, if you were going to give it to me as a job, how do you do this? Oh, well, I get this cramp in my neck and then I notice it goes down here. That's the location. Your body wants you to know where it is. You're quite literally pulling it up. And when we can start noticing where it is, we can go in and start to clear away the pain that doesn't need to be there. Subconscious needs to understand that it's got the lesson. It keeps the pain as a reminder of the lesson so that you don't forget. But now, with science, with our understanding of language, with the tools and the techniques that we have, we can separate the pain, we can keep the lesson, and we can move beyond it. And when we start to lift those blocks, when we start to separate that pain, a completely different person comes out because we're having different perceptions because the neurophysiology has now rewired and recalibrated.
Oh, that is so good. Some of you might be listening right now, right? And you're trying to understand, how does this fit into my life and my life flow? Or maybe I haven't experienced, major trauma, major tragedy, things like that, which usually almost everyone has. That's a whole other conversation. One of the things that I'm often trying to explain to clients is that everyone has a story, but we haven't always connected with our story. And so, the same way a person can have, as you explained before, that deep interaction of the memory of trauma, being touched the wrong way, things like that. There's also the what you remember about your first feelings of major failure, major disappointment, the way that daddy used to look at you when you didn't win, and it always sits with you, and you have to be a winner no matter what to show everybody you're a winner. And so these things actually take place in the workplace, but we don't see it as trauma related, as drama related, as pain related. We just see it as drive. I think that's really important that we understand how these emotions interact with us and can hold us back in everyday life. One of the things that I love about talking to people like you who actually study these things is that I have a very natural way of reading people and understanding, but I don't know what I'm reading. Does that make sense? So as an example, I'm just going to give you as an example. I watched you do interviews. So before I interview with someone, I watch 3 to 4 interviews. I watched one interview where the interviewer was very like stoppy and like they were like a little bit aggressive almost with the question asking. And so like you were like a little bit like on the defensive, and your defensive was to actually be offensive. Like so you actually like take over the interview. Like you have that thing where you can go, okay, I don't know where we're going. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna like take over so at least I have a predictability. Like I watched you like shift into almost coach mode, like I can do an interview too. So if I gotta do this, we can do it. And everybody, you were smiling the whole time, but it was like I need to do this to make sure I'm safe. And I watched it, right? I watched another interview where you were in the interview, and the interviewer was a little more chill and a little more calm, and so more of your intellect was coming out in your answers. But then you also were like watching him to make sure you had an understanding of where. And so because I watch these things happen, I have an understanding of how to approach you in an interview, right? Because my ultimate goal is what you said. You said the goal is to help that other version of you to emerge, right? So as I was in our first 10 minutes of filming, you were answering a question. I'm looking at your shoulders. I'm paying attention to the pace of you talking. I'm going, that's the real her. She's not, there's no act. She's just like comfortable. And she, like, you even had moments where you were trying to find answers and you felt safe enough to search for the answer and not feel like you had the right word, right? Because you're safe. I'm always paying attention to these things and I'm never saying it. And the fact that you can put words to it, that you understand it, that you study it, right? People like you are tremendous assets because you can then teach the next people how to do it, which takes me to my next question. You can, of course, respond to whatever you want to that I said. And then also, I would love to hear you talk a little about in one interview, you talked about the importance of the right teacher. How sometimes in life you will be told what you can't learn, what you can't do, what you can't, and it's only because you're not in front of the right teacher who understands how to get a lesson into you.
You said so many beautiful things in that last piece. Oh my gosh. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you,
Mm,
thank you. Such a true, true, true gift. So
mm,
thank you for being the amazing person that you are, but also for wanting to support people in the way that you do.
mm,
That is
mm.
amazing. So thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Truly huge. And he's completely accurate about all the all the statements about those interviews. And I assure you I know which ones that you're talking about. And the right teacher. So, especially with how important I value language and I value understanding people and making sure that I'm a person that can be easily approached by other people and that they feel welcomed when they're talking to me. That truly comes across in tone, but also in intention and how we carry ourselves. I want people to know, oh, I can talk to her. She's safe. I don't have to worry about being judged. That is something that I hold of the highest value and the highest standard because I want people to feel comfortable. when we are wanting to find coaches and teachers and mentors, we're going to be often met with the one that we need right now. And it might not be the one that we're going to stick with till the end of time. And I had mentioned this to another person. I had said about your speech pathologist. She had a young child, and I was the speech pathologist paired with them, and the child was 3. And I had said, yeah, I was leaving the company and whatever the case was. And she goes, "No, I can't lose you." And I said, "I won't be your only speech pathologist. I will be the one that you need right now." And understanding that concept of this is the one that we need right now, or this is the one that I need to teach me what I really want in the person that I'm looking for. And that goes with our significant other, that goes with our friends, that goes with our teachers and our mentors and our coaches, because they're going to be guiding posts of what we want and what we don't want. So that way we can look at everyone as a teacher, teaching us more of what we do want, teaching us more of what we don't want. When we find that person that we do feel comfortable with, that we do feel safe with, understanding that that is something you can build
Mm.
upon. You want to make sure, and this is something my coach tells me on the regular, always be testing. ABT, Lenora, always be
What does that
testing.
mean?
So what that means is know what you want and make sure that the people that you're interacting with are matching your values, your criteria, what's important to you, what you hold dear. If you are a very respectful person, you're not going to go running around with somebody who is being disrespectful to you or to others. That's a mismatch. So if you match with each other and you say, "Oh, we're having a great time," and that is something that you hold dear and you notice, this isn't right for me, that's a mismatch. It's an indicator that you have tested to see if this person is respectful, if they're on a match with you. If they've shown you that they're not, no problem. Shift away, shift towards, or shift away. Always be testing, especially in my marriage. My husband and I like to make sure that we're on the same page. Where are we? And if not, we need to have a discussion about that with my clients. Are we on par for your goals? What does this look like? How else can I support you? And if there's a mismatch, one of us has to shift, and depending on what that indicator is. So if you're in charge of a company, CEOs, you have to look at your employees. Are they supporting you, and are you supporting them in things that are important to them? Always be testing. Notice where you are and keep a running list of what's important to you. And that way, you know they're a match for you or they're not a match for you. They're teaching you something really valuable either way. Are they teaching you in the way that you want to be taught, or are they teaching you in a way that you don't like and you need to shift away from that?
Cut.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy, Jody Eric Matthews, the director of King of the Block. And I just want to say, if it's Monday, I'm watching Hope Rising with Maurice.
As you answer these questions, we heard you at the beginning of the interview speak to, there was a point in your journey where you would have never been on this camera, you would have never been answering these questions, and now we hear, a level of confidence and eloquence coming through. I've heard you speak before about how really what we're looking at is a series of tools and techniques that you've practiced and used consistently that have helped you grow. For somebody who's listening to you today and they're thinking, I could never do what you do, whether it is the getting in touch with my feelings, thoughts, emotions, or it's the evolution, your personal evolution, what do you say to that person who doesn't believe they can do what you're doing in terms of really walking in the fullness of who they are?
That is an amazing question. Walking in the full, what can I say to somebody who wants to really walk in the fullness of who they are? Keep going. Absolutely, would be one that I would surely say. But also notice what you want. Notice your thoughts. Sit down with a journal and understand this is how I'm thinking. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can do this. I can do that. Notice and really truly take an evaluation of your what you're holding valuable to you and start to shift your language. For example, I can't run a marathon. Okay. If I could, what might that look like? When you take something, I can't, you just have it, you had a very strong limiter, I can't run a marathon. And we shifted the language to, if I could, what might that look like? I can't make $1 million. I'll never be a millionaire. If I could, what might that look like? When you start to play with that language, when you start to notice your thoughts, so you write them down, and the great thing about writing and not typing is writing is in your own handwriting. Pen and paper, classic, you'll never go wrong. Writing it down, and then on the other side, what might this look like? We start to shift our language. Things like, if I could, what might I? We'll certainly take that limited mindset and start to open it. Words like might or yet really start to allow us to play with this language. And one thing that I had really struggled with was I would say affirmations and my brain would go, liar. It did not like I am worthy and deserving. Liar. It just would not, it was like bouncing a tennis ball off a wall. It just would not stick. So what I started to do was really cultivate and really start to expand on my language. I am worthy of love because I am such and such, because I think I am a good person. By my standards, yes, I think I'm a good person. So therefore, this is my perception. I am worthy and deserving of X, Y, and Z because when we start to add that word because, we're going to expand and our brain is going to look for an answer to this. So if we like to think of our brain as the first original Google search engine, because your brain is a question and answering machine. Ask a better question, get a better answer. So if you think, I'm not worthy, or why am I so unworthy? Yeah, it's a tough question. When you start to say, why might I be worthy? Change the language a little bit, change the words a little bit, and your brain will come up with a different answer. So, really, to me, the master key of everything, of how we perceive this world, of our mindset, of everything that we do, all comes down to language. The language that we use, our words, the tonality that we're talking to ourselves in, the pictures that we're telling ourselves. It's a language. And when we can start to choose our language, it is a choice, we can start to shape it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and notice those victories.
The language of transformation, if you will. That's so good,
So
so
good.
good. I'm really loving this interview, and I hope that all of you who are listening, who are watching, are really getting so much out of it. I'm wondering though, if you actually sent this to your friends or your family or your coworkers, or if you are keeping this to yourself. I'm hoping that you actually sent this to somebody else because they need these tools, these techniques, these thought processes of how to transform. So Lenora, I have just a couple more quick questions for you, and then I'm going to let you go. I've now made these last three like my golden last three. Before I only had two every interview. Now I have these three. And so, the first one is just simply, if somebody is really benefiting a lot from hearing you, where do they find you? Where do they go? How can they find you online?
I love that one. So there's a whole lot of social media. The best place to reach me is at my website, which is DTB Horizons. And it stands for D is determined, T is to, TO, B, determined to be
I love
horizons.com.
it. Determined to be. Lenora, what is one question that you wish people would ask you so that they could really get to know you better?
Oh my goodness. You know I'm a talkative person. One question. Oh gosh. How much time do you have for us to have a good conversation? How about you? What is a question that you would ask?
You know what? I'm going to steal the last answer that I heard someone answer to me. He simply said, "Are you okay, really?" And I think that I wish more people asked it, but I also wish the people that had the capacity to take in the answer were the ones who asked it. How about that? right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of people who ask it, but they don't really have the capacity to handle the answer. But then there's other people that you wish would want to know, are you really okay? And they're often not the people who present the question. So yes. Now here is the one that my listeners are used to. All right.
Mhm.
So I need you to imagine that it is 100 years from now, and there is a museum of popular culture. This is a place that people go to so that they can really take in the learning of this time and place. And there is a room marked hope. Inside of the room, there are time capsules, and they walk up to a time capsule with your name on it. There's pictures of your family, there's pictures of you teaching and speaking and your degrees and all these different things in there. And then they find this clip. And this is a clip where you explain what hope means to you. What would you say that hope is?
What would I say that hope is? I would say hope is the guiding light in a very dark space.
A guiding light in a very dark space. Well, it is my hope that some of you, as you listen today, if you were maybe in a dark headspace, that you learned that there is truly hope waiting for you, but it may take you thinking differently. It may take a different perspective, a different perception, you approaching and reapproaching your life so that you can find the real light and the real hope that is already there. And I think the greatest part of all of this is you guys can hopefully see that not only does Lenora help with your mindset, but ultimately she helps with the things your mindsets lead to. So if you're someone who maybe is struggling with an eating disorder, struggling with something food related, you're binge eating, you're stress eating, sometimes guilty, right? That part of the approach to dealing with that is thinking of the thoughts that get you there. Any final words, Lenora, that you have for all of us?
It was an absolute pleasure spending time with you and your listeners. Thank you so very much. Maurice, and you are world class, my friend. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for saying that. I truly appreciate it. And as always, we appreciate all of you for tuning in. I hope you got a lot out of it. I hope you will really share this with someone. And if you haven't yet, please just leave your comments. What was said today that shook you up, that got you thinking, that inspired you, whatever it was. And so for now, I will let you guys go until we see you next Monday on another episode of Hope Rising, where the unfulfilled go for fulfillment and the uninspired go for a dose of inspiration. We'll see you soon.